Welcome to Miss Retro Reads. I'm going to be reading today something from Saint Alphonsus Liguori on getting rid of melancholy. And this is from a saint, so let's listen to what he has to say. This was written for nuns, but you can definitely get some good advice from this. The necessity of banishing melancholy. It is necessary to avoid melancholy, which is the pest of devotion and a source of 1,000 faults. As long as you are disturbed, you will always fall into many defects. You will do no good, and almost all your prayers, meditations, communions, spiritual readings, and other exercises will be unprofitable, because they will be performed badly and with 1,000 distractions. Remember that all your inquietude and troubles arise from not accepting crosses with resignation from the hand of God. The will of God renders all tribulations sweet and amiable. You complain that you are infirm, despised, persecuted, and in heredity. Unite yourself to the divine will, and these sufferings will be no longer painful to you. If you tell me that you are not so much tormented by these external crosses as by the interior scruples of conscience and by fears of being at enmity with God, I answer that your confessor has, I suppose, already ordered you to speak no more of your past life. By the grace of God, you abhor your past sins. You are resolved to die rather than commit even a deliberate venial sin. You frequent the sacraments and seek to belong entirely to God. All these are signs that you enjoy His grace and friendship. Why then are you disturbed? Why do you say, "Who knows how I stand before God? How shall I die? Have I confessed all my sins? Is my confessor deceived? The devil tells me that I shall be damned." Behold the unusual tales of scrupulous souls. Ah, abandon yourself into the arms of divine mercy, and say in all tranquility, "Lord, I obey thy minister, and thus I hope in thy blood to be saved and never to lose thy grace." With regard to the present, I hope, if you are troubled in mind, that you have no attachment to venial faults that you daily commit, and that they are not fully deliberate. Detest them as soon as you perceive them, and then remain tranquil. But, Father, my greatest troubles arise from doubts of consenting to grievous sins when I am assailed by bad thoughts. I here briefly repeat that a person of timorous conscience, when he is not certain of having fallen into mortal sin, should remain certain of being in the state of grace, because it is impossible for him whose will is confirmed in good purpose to revolt against God without having a clear knowledge of His consent. When your confessor tells you to disregard these fears and to go to communion without confession, obey him blindly and do not listen to the devil, who seeks to disturb you with scruples in order to make you abandon the way of perfection. When you feel agitated, say to the Lord, "My Father, I leave my soul in thy hands. And if it please thee that this cross should continue till death, I am content. Do not permit me to offend thee. Make me love thee, and I do not refuse to suffer as much as thou pleasest." Saint Francis de Sales says that God loves with a tender love the souls that thus abandon themselves into His paternal bosom, leaving themselves to be governed by His divine providence. For He will make all things cooperate to their good, helping these chosen souls to follow Him with the will, without any other support than that of His divine pleasure. But perhaps you will tell me that you can never have peace because you find that you have entered religion to please your parents and against your own will. I answer thus: if at that time of your profession you had not a vocation, I would not have advised you to make the vows of religious, but I would have entreated you to suspend your resolution of going back to the world and casting yourself into the many dangers of perdition that are found in the world. I now see you placed in the house of God and made either voluntary or unwillingly the spouse of Jesus Christ, For my part, I cannot pity you more than I could pity a person that had been transported, even against his will, from a place infected with pestilence and surrounded by enemies, to a healthful country, to be placed there for life, secure against every foe. I add, grant that what you state is true, now that you are professed in a convent, and that it is impossible for you to leave it. Tell me, what do you wish to do? If you have entered religion against your inclinations, you must now remain with cheerfulness. If you abandon yourself to melancholy, you will lead a life of misery, and will expose yourself to great danger of suffering a hell here and another thereafter. You must then make a virtue of necessity. And if the devil has brought you into religion for your destruction, let it be your care to avail yourself of your holy state for your salvation and to become a saint. Give yourself to God from the heart, and I assure you that by so doing, you will become more content than all the princesses and queens of this world. Being asked his opinion regarding a person who has become a nun against her will, St. Francis de Sales answered, "It is true that this child, if she had not been obliged by her parents, would not have left the world, but this is of little importance provided she knows that the force employed by her parents is more useful to her than the permission to follow her own will. For now she can say, if I had not lost such liberty, I would have lost true liberty." The saint meant to say that had she not been compelled by her parents to become a nun, her liberty, which would have induced her to remain in the world, would have robbed her of the true liberty of the children of God, which consists in freedom from the chains and dangers of the world. You may say in reply, "But how can I be content if I have not been called to religion? But what does it matter that you have not had a vocation from the beginning? Although you have not become a nun in obedience to a divine call, it is certain that God has permitted your profession for your welfare, and if he did not call you then, he certainly calls you now to be his without reserve." St. Paul, the first hermit, went into the desert not to remain in it, but to fly from the persecution that was then carried on against the church. But he was afterwards called by God to remain in the desert. He remained and became a saint. When St. Teresa first entered a monastery, she entered not without reluctance. She said that in leaving her father's house, the pain that she felt was so great that she thought it equal to the pain that she should suffer at death, and in her life it is related that she took the habit, as it were by force. But after all, she became a great saint and the reformer of the Carmelite order. Blessed Hyacintha Marascati, a religious of the convent of St. Clare in Viterbo, was also induced to take the sacred veil against her inclination, and for 10 years led a very imperfect life. But being one day illumined with divine light, she gave herself entirely to God and persevered till death, for the space of 24 years in a life of holiness, so that she has deserved to be venerated on the altar. I guess what he's saying here is there are some people even who have married that say, "Oh man, if I had only married this woman or this man, it would have been different." Or if only we lived in another country, or, you're always looking for something that could be different. And so he's addressing specifically religion, religious life, but you could take it in any state of life, someone that's discontent with what they have. Likewise, Sister Mary Bonaventure, a nun in the convent of Torre de Specchi, entered against her will, but after a life of tepidity and dissipation, she went during the first meditation of the spiritual exercises and threw herself at the feet of Father Lanciencio of the Society of Jesus and courageously said to him, "Father, I have learned what God wishes from me. I wish to be a saint and a great saint, and I wish to be one immediately." And by the divine aid she executed her purpose, so abundant were her tears that she could say no more, but she went to her cell and at the foot of the crucifix wrote the following protestation: I, Mary Bonaventure, this day in the beginning of the spiritual exercises, offer myself entirely to Thee, O my God. I promise to love nothing but Thee, O my Jesus. Accept, O most loving Redeemer, this paper bathed in my tears, which I consecrate to Thee as the pledge of my love. I leave it in the wound of Thy side, that through the merits of Thy blood Thou mayest pardon my sins and establish me in Thy love, so that I may be no longer mine, and may be all Thine. It is in this manner you must act. Resolve this moment to belong entirely to God, and make the same protestation before the Blessed Sacrament or at the foot of the crucifix. And doubt not that if you are resolute in your determination, the Lord will stretch forth his hand to raise you to a high degree of sanctity. Thus your misfortune, as you call it, will be a source of the greatest happiness, as it was to Sister Bonaventure, who in a short time became a saint. She survived her conversion only a year, but she died rich in merits. For during that year all her time was spent in meditations and works of penance, and she expired in celestial peace, and immediately after death there were manifest signs of her admission to glory. Have courage then and rejoice now that God calls you to his perfect love, and say, I know, O Lord, that thou dost wish me entirely for thyself. Love which is divided is not true love. But remember that to become a saint, desires are not sufficient. It is necessary to put the hand to the work. Begin to make a little more mental prayer. Make a spiritual reading every day, a visit to the Blessed Sacrament, and to an image of Mary. When reproved, be humble. When despised, be silent. Begin to mortify the appetite, curiosity, and self-will. Be not indifferent, but begin the work, and by degrees you will succeed. Self-love will live in us as long as we have life, and therefore we must continually endeavor to cut down the noxious plants that spring up in our garden. To become a saint without trouble is impossible. The end. And I thought also about people who suffer a lot. Maybe they have, totally come to terms with where they are in the world or wherever or whatever God called them to, and is totally resigned to that, but also might have some kind of terrible suffering that they've dealt with for many, many years. Just know that if you're resigned to God, he's using your sufferings for something, and you might not know what they are for. It's kind of like if you think about money in the bank, your suffering is money in the bank, and Jesus can write a check for whatever he thinks that money should go to, and it's going to help somebody someplace. So I hope you guys have a great Sunday. If you're suffering, keep with it. You can do it. God's going to look after you. He really loves you. And thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads. And I'll meet you back here Wednesday for another reading.